Okay, so you know how everyone's been buzzing about Mel Robbins and the 5-second rule for, like, forever? Well, hold on to your hats because she's back with this brand new theory and it's already making waves.
hmm
It's called the let them theory.
It's funny. It's like this theory kind of builds on that 5-second rule, but takes it to a whole other level.
Yeah, and the whole idea is pretty simple, right? We spend so much time and energy stressing over stuff. We can't control what other people think, what they do, how they react, you name it. And while we're doing all that, we totally forget about the one thing we can control ourselves.
Exactly. And Robbins, she goes even further, saying this applies to literally everything. Dealing with crazy stuff at work, family drama that's off the charts, trying to figure out relationships, even like global
Wait,
issues.
global issues. Okay, now I'm really interested. But before we go there, where did this whole let them theory even come from? Like, how'd she come up with it?
Well, she starts the book with the story about her son's prom night. Picture it. Corsage disaster, out of nowhere downpour, end up at some random taco joint. Typical teenage mayhem.
Oh, I can already relate.
Right. But here's the thing. How Robbins dealt with it, or really how she didn't deal with it, is a perfect example of this let them thinking. Instead of getting all wrapped up in the drama, she just kind of let go of needing to control everything and decided to just go with the flow.
Ah, so it's like prom night is a metaphor for all of life's little curveballs.
Exactly. And Robbins makes this great point. Grown-ups, we act like kids sometimes emotionally, and we can't get sucked into managing their tantrums. So just like Robbins let go of that prom night craziness, the let them theory says we should do that in every part of our lives.
That's a pretty powerful image. Makes you think how many of our daily headaches would just disappear if we could just chill out and embrace that whole let go thing. But, before we dive deep into the theory, didn't Robin start out small? Like, wasn't she sharing the 5-second rule in, I don't know, church basements and classrooms?
You're right, she did. And her journey to becoming this global phenomenon is pretty amazing when you think about it.
It really makes you think something that seems small or insignificant now could turn into something huge later on if you're consistent.
That's definitely the takeaway. It's inspiring to see how she pushed past her own self-doubt and like imposter syndrome to get where she is today. But I'm curious, what are your initial thoughts on the let them and let me phrases? I mean, they sound pretty similar, but I feel like there's an important difference there.
Okay, yeah, she mentions let them and let me a lot. And at first I thought they were pretty much the same thing, but I'm starting to get that there's a key difference. So
Yeah.
what is it? What's the difference?
That's where things get interesting. Let them is about this emotional detachment, but not in a cold, uncaring way. It's about realizing you have absolutely zero control over what other people are thinking or doing, and deciding to protect your own peace by not getting caught up in their mess.
Oh, yeah, I remember that example she uses about being left out of a girls' trip. Instead of freaking out, she used it to figure out why it hurt and what she could learn from it. So it wasn't about ignoring her feelings. It was more like choosing to focus on her own growth instead of letting other people's actions control her emotions, right?
Spot on. And that takes us to Let Me, which is all about taking responsibility for our own happiness, friendships, careers, everything. It's about building the life we want instead of waiting for someone to hand it to us.
So it's almost like let them is about releasing control over things outside of us, and then let me is about like grabbing the reins of our own lives.
Exactly. It's
Okay.
about that realization that no one's coming to save us. We're each in charge of our own journey.
Speaking of taking charge, Robbins is so real about her own struggles with people pleasing. She even admits to holding back business posts for like 2 years just because she was terrified of what her friends would think.
And that fear of judgment, that need to control how other people see us, that's something so many of us can relate to. But it's a trap.
Yeah, because the more we try to control what other people think, the more we stop ourselves from going after what we really want.
Exactly. And Robbins, she points out that there's actually science behind this fear. Our brains, they're wired to avoid pain, and that includes the social pain of criticism. It's like a survival thing. But when it comes to living a really fulfilling life, learning to let go of that need to control everything, that can actually make us more courageous.
It's like we're so scared of being judged that we end up judging ourselves before anyone else even gets the chance. I mean, what could we achieve if we could just quiet that inner critic, you know?
And that's exactly what the let them theory pushes us to do. To stop trying to control what other people think and just embrace our own unique path. The question is, how do we actually use this in our relationships? Especially with family where things can get so complicated.
That's a good point. I remember Robbins talking about this frame of reference idea. She talked about how her own mom didn't like her husband, Chris, at first. But it turned out it wasn't really about Chris at all. It was about her mom's own baggage from leaving home young and never going back. She was putting her own fears onto their relationship.
Yeah, and this shows how understanding someone's past experiences, their own frame of reference, can be so helpful in figuring out relationships. It doesn't mean we have to agree with them, but it helps us see things from their side and have some empathy.
So instead of getting stuck in who's right and who's wrong, the let them theory says both people can be right in their own way based on their own experiences. That's a pretty different way of looking at things, especially with family. But what about using this at work, like with a tough boss? Say you're stuck with a boss who just won't give you that promotion you deserve. How does let them work in that situation?
Well, you can't force a promotion, right? You can't make your boss change their mind. The let them approach here is about recognizing that, yeah, you can't control the situation, but you can control how you react to it.
So instead of letting your frustration make you do something you'll regret, you take a step back and realize that your boss's actions are their own deal.
Exactly. And that's where let me comes in. Instead of focusing on what you can't change, like your boss's decision, you put your energy into what you can control, your actions, and your career.
So maybe start looking at other jobs or focus on learning new skills that make you even more valuable. It's about remembering that you're bigger than any one job or what one person thinks.
That's it. You're not defined by your current situation. You always have the power to choose how you respond and to create a path that works for you.
It's a good reminder that even when it feels like you're stuck, you still have choices. You've got to be willing to see them and do something about it. It's funny, when you're a kid, friendships are so easy. You just show up at school or the playground and bam, there's your crew ready for anything.
Yeah, there's something so simple about those early friendships, right? You're always close by, pretty much all the time. Your lives are moving at the same pace, and your energy levels just kind of match.
But then we get older and things change. People move. Priorities shift. You get busy with work and family. It's like Robbins calls it, that whole great scattering thing. And suddenly keeping those friendships going takes a lot more effort.
Yeah, and it can be tough to let go of that idea that we should always be connected like we were when we were younger. We might start to feel like the friendship's fading or we're doing something wrong.
So how does this let them theory help us deal with friendships as adults?
Well, Robbins breaks it down really well. She talks about these three pillars of friendship: proximity, timing, and energy. And she makes this point that when these pillars change, our relationships change too.
Okay, so walk me through those pillars a bit.
Sure. So proximity is the most obvious one. If your close friend moves across the country, well, that physical distance just naturally makes it harder to hang out like you used to, right? It takes more effort to stay connected. You have to plan things out, make phone calls, do video chats.
Exactly. Then there's timing. Let's say you're single and your best friend just had a baby. Your lives are in totally different places, and that can affect the kind of energy you each bring to the friendship.
Yeah, you're probably not going out for late night drinks anymore. Even texting might be less frequent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even though those changes are totally normal, they can be hard to adjust to. That's where the let them part of the theory comes in. It's about letting go of expectations and accepting that friendships change as our lives change.
So it's about recognizing that it's not personal, it's just life happening.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And instead of feeling rejected or hurt when a friendship changes naturally, we can choose to appreciate the connection for what it was and what it is now.
Which frees us up to make new connections too, right? Just because some friendships have drifted doesn't mean we're going to be lonely.
Absolutely. And Robbins, she gives some great advice on how to make new friends as adults. She says it's important to put yourself out there and create opportunities for connection. She talks about going to coffee shops, but not just to grab a coffee and run. It's about actually talking to people.
Right, and that's just one example. She says, try joining group classes, volunteering, going to events that interest you. Anything that puts you around people who share your interests.
So it's about building that social network, creating connections that make you feel like you belong.
And she's really big on taking initiative. If you connect with someone, don't wait for them to reach out. Invite them for coffee or a walk or something related to that class you took together.
Be the one to make the first move. I love that. It's so empowering. And speaking of putting yourself out there, let's talk about dating. The dating world can be rough, and Robbins doesn't try to pretend it's not. She's pretty straight up. You'll know. If you're confused, they're probably just not that into you.
And she's a big advocate for both people putting in effort in relationships. Settling for less than you deserve will just lead to more heartache later on. It's better to walk away from something that's not working than to hold on hoping things will magically get better.
That's a hard lesson to learn, especially when you're excited about someone new. But it's so true. If someone's always sending mixed signals or making excuses, it's probably time to move on.
And when it comes to heartbreak, Robin shared some really helpful advice from this depth psychologist, Dr. Ann Davin. Her daughter, Sawyer, was going through a breakup while they were writing the book, so this advice comes from real life, from the trenches.
So we're talking about tried and true heartbreak wisdom, not just theory.
Exactly. And Dr. Davin recommends no contact for 30 days. It might sound harsh, but it's really about giving yourself the space to heal and break those patterns of attachment. She also suggests filling your calendar with things you enjoy, taking on new challenges, and surrounding yourself with people who lift you up.
So it's that combination of letting go and taking positive action that helps you get through heartbreak.
Exactly. And remember that let me part, heartbreak can make you feel so vulnerable and insecure, so it's even more important to take care of yourself and love yourself during that time.
It's about remembering you deserve love no matter what someone else does. And self-love isn't just about bubble baths and affirmations. It's about setting boundaries, going after your passions, and choosing relationships that make you feel good, not drained.
Absolutely. It's about making yourself a priority. And that brings us to another tricky question. How do you help someone you love who's struggling without enabling their negative behavior?
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's so easy to want to fix things for people we care about. But I know Robbins is all about tough love.
She is, and she makes it clear that helping someone doesn't mean fixing things for them. It's about supporting them without taking on their burdens as your own. She uses this great analogy. Offering support is like throwing someone a ball. You can toss it to them, but they have to choose to catch it and run with it.
So you're there to lend a hand, but ultimately it's their race to run.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Enabling happens when we try to run the race for them. Maybe it's constantly bailing them out financially or making excuses for their behavior or rescuing them from the consequences of their choices.
It's tough because you love them and want them to succeed. But sometimes the best thing you can do is step back and let them face the consequences of their actions.
It might seem counterintuitive, but it can be what pushes them to change. Robbins also talks about setting clear boundaries, especially when it comes to money.
Oh, yeah. I remember her talking about what happened with her husband, Chris, when his business was going through a rough patch and he was struggling with alcohol. His brother wouldn't lend him money, and even though it was hard at the time, it ended up being the wake-up call Chris needed to turn things around.
It's a perfect example of how enabling, even with the best intentions, can actually stop someone from reaching that point where they're ready to change.
So sometimes tough love is the most loving thing you can do. But it's not just about setting boundaries right. Robbins also talks about creating an environment that supports healing.
Yes, she does. It's not about abandoning the person you care about. It's about offering practical and emotional support in a way that helps them take control of their own recovery.
She tells this great story about the support she got after having postpartum depression. Her loved ones didn't give her a ton of advice or try to fix her. They just showed up for her and gave her the space to heal on her own time.
They helped with practical things like cooking and cleaning, and they encouraged her to get out of the house and do things even when she just wanted to hide away. It's a good reminder that sometimes the best support is just being there and listening.
It's about holding space for someone without judging them and trusting them to find their own way to heal.
And Robbins says this approach works for any situation where someone's struggling, whether it's addiction, mental health, or just a hard time in their life. It's about letting go of the need to control everything and focusing on creating an environment that helps them heal and grow.
So it's about supporting without judging and trusting that they'll find their own way to recovery. It's kind of hitting me that even when we're focused on helping someone else, it still comes back to that let me idea.
It really does, yeah. Because you can't give what you don't have. You got to take care of yourself first if you want to truly be there for others.
It's like that saying about putting on your own oxygen mask on a plane before helping someone else.
Exactly. And I think that brings us to the heart of the let them theory. It's all about changing our perspective.
It's not about turning into like emotionless robots who are ignoring other people's needs, right?
Not at all.
Yeah.
It's about understanding that real power comes from choosing how we react to all the stuff life throws our way.
So it's not about trying to control the outcome, which is often impossible, but about controlling our own thoughts and actions.
Yeah, and that change in focus can be so freeing. Think about all that energy we waste trying to make people change or make things go our way.
What if we took all that energy and put it towards things we actually can influence our own goals, personal growth, building better relationships? The possibilities are like Huge.
And Robbins reminds us that this isn't a one-time fix. It's an ongoing thing. There'll be times when we fall back into old habits, get caught up in drama, or let fear control us.
But this let them theory, it gives us a way to see those moments and make a different choice.
Exactly. It's about taking a breath, remembering what we can control, and acting from a place of strength, not fear.
And that shift in mindset, that's where the real magic happens. It's not about being perfectly detached. It's about constantly growing and choosing how we want to be in the world.
I totally agree. So here's something to think about. Where would you be today if you'd put all that energy you spent trying to control others into your own dreams? What would you have achieved? What relationships would you have built? What impact would you have made?
That's a powerful question. And I hope everyone listening takes some time to really think about it. Because in the end, the let them theory is about taking back our power, stepping into our full potential, and creating a life that's truly our own. A life that's real and fulfilling.
And that's a journey worth taking.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the let them theory. We hope you found it helpful, and more importantly, that you'll use these ideas to make positive changes in your own life.